Welcome, Blakely. Welcome, Linda. Welcome. Welcome, Dee. Welcome.
Please put your names in your email addresses in the chat.
Hi, Linda.
If you'd like to get a copy of the chat afterwards, and if you'd like to get our weekly newsletter, anybody else here for the first time? Mike? David, welcome. Welcome. I was really hoping that some Veterans for Peace would join us today. I'm really excited about our speaker.
Doug is on the call, Karen.
Oh, is he? Welcome.
He's the president of the local chapter of VFP.
Thank you so much. Doug, thanks for joining us. There you are. Hi.
Thanks for the invitation.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're really going to focus on hearing about Portland. And first, we're going to have Randa sing and have a little brief intro and have the grannies sing. While Randa is singing, if you could mute yourself, we can listen to her and also sing along. And that'll kind of help our bodies arrive here, help harmonize our energy with each other, and bring us to some grounding in who we are, in our bodies, and what we're doing here together.
Okay. All right. Send. Okay. All right. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom land. Unidentifieds ain't gonna let no unidentifieds turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no unidentifieds turn us around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, walking in the freedom land. Ain't gonna let no anger, no, ain't gonna let no heartache turn us around, turn us around, oh, turn us around. Ain't gonna let no heartache turn us around. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, oh, keep on marching on to freedom land. Yeah!
Welcome to Tuesdays with Tillis. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It lifts my heart to see you all. We are a community of nonviolent resistance. We've been meeting on the street and then on Zoom for 163 weeks, I believe it is this week. And we've become a community. I got it wrong, Jade. I'm sorry. But anyway, since the inauguration, when we could see that, when we could see what was coming, and we began to resist the Trump administration. So welcome, everyone. And I would like to welcome at this time the Raging Grannies who've been with us every step of the way and continue to inspire us. people who've been activists, all of them, for a long time.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This morning, recognizing that our country is in a desperate situation, we Raging Grannies are going to focus our song on our concern for our grandchildren. So Raging Grannies, unmute yourselves for your verse. I'm going to hum the first line.
Our nation has people in desperate straits. It's high time we care for the United States. For we are the people we must liberate, and fascistic rule for our grandchildren's sake. And fascistic rule for our grandchildren's sake.
Our families and neighbors have been torn apart, but the leaders in Washington don't have a heart. Evictions, closed businesses, job loss and hate. Let's rebuild our home for our grandchildren's sake. Let's rebuild our home for our grandchildren's sake.
We're overextended, we're stretched to the max. We're tired of our fighting for healthcare and masks. This virus, they're spreading all over the place. Let's isolate, close down for our grandchildren's sake. Let's isolate, close down for our grandchildren's sake.
Elected officials are driven by lies, while racism, gun use, and poverty rise. What kind of a world do we want to create? A world filled with justice for our grandchildren's sake. Yes, a world filled with justice for our grandchildren's sake. Yay!
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you, Vicki and Jade, who pointed out that it's 183, not 163 weeks.
3.
So my friends, I'm going to introduce our speaker. I'm really excited that he's with us today. Ted Corcoran is a veteran and a documentarian and a very good friend of Tuesdays with Tillis, who continues to move my heart and teach me so much. He just came back from Portland, and he is going to show us some videos and talk to us about exactly what is happening out there. And I am going to turn this over to him.
I appreciate that so much. And I was telling Karen this before, I'm really excited to speak to all of you because we've been doing this for so long, and I consider us experts when it comes to this. And so what I want to do is kind of unpack what you're seeing on social media and through the media to put things in perspective and kind of take a step back and kind of look at how these events are progressing each night. To give you just a real quick background, what happened was totally spur of the moment. Wednesday night, I just saw what was happening and escalating in Portland, and I had to do something. And I've been active in a lot of the movements and actions that we had in Raleigh, and knowing that and kind of having that experience, I wanted to go and see it firsthand. My followers crowdsourced me a ticket to Portland, jumped in a plane, and was hitting the ground Thursday night. And that's where I'm going to go and start. I'm going to share my screen, and I want you to kind of get a full understanding of what's going on. I'm not going to be able to see chat while I'm doing this. So what I'll do is I'll pause after the first night and see if anybody has any questions. But Karen, can I get a thumbs up? Can you see everything on my screen right now?
I can.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. So here's a little bit of background. So they've been doing this now at this point for 60 straight days. So you have an extremely experienced group of protesters that are doing this night in and night out. I have this map over here, and what I wanted you to see is just the lay of the land. The first big piece of disinformation is that this is raging throughout Portland. That is completely false. This is taking place between basically two intersections, but basically like a 4-square block area around the U.S. District Courthouse, a county justice center, and 2 parks. These parks, if I was trying to compare it to something in Raleigh, a little bit bigger than Moore Square. Like it would be like 2 more squares a piece in where you would see this camp. So the first thing I want to show is I showed up early on Thursday around 6 o'clock and went to the camp. So this is a permanent, semi-permanent group that is there throughout the day. So the first thing that I noticed is that these are people that have been doing this for a very long time. This isn't something that they've done in the past 50 days. This is something that they might be doing over the past couple of years. I know that we've been hearing a lot about riot ribs. Riot ribs is feeding all the protesters, and it's actually going on during the day. And so what you're also seeing is that there's a really large homeless population in Portland. And so these people are taking care of the homeless population during the day. And what that's doing is gaining community support. It's almost like I would like call them like Robin Hood. Like they're out there trying to go and take care of the people that are in need. This is all taking place right here at the camp. So I know what everyone is kind of seeing on social media is the fence. And so I want to show you the fence without a crowd of people in front of it. And the other thing I want you to notice as far as this video goes is that this is about 6 p.m. No one's paying attention to that fence. That fence is being completely ignored. Everybody is mainly in the camp. So this is timelines for Thursday. If you see right over here in the Raleigh area, the NAACP had an event that night where it was trying to refocus the message of what's been happening the past couple nights. And it's something that we would normally see in Raleigh. And I'll show you a video of what it looks like.
Together, let our voices be known, let our voices be heard, that we are here and we're not going to be silent anymore. We're not going to be silent anymore.
That's very familiar to us. That's something that could have been Raleigh. That could have been what we normally see as far as an action is concerned. This is 7:35 at night, daytime, organized by the NAACP. So what starts happening once you start getting a little bit more dark as far as the night is concerned, that group is still over here at that rally point, away from the fence, not paying attention to it. This is where you're seeing a lot of like the positive things, the cell phone lights. And so here's a view from the crowd. Chanting the hands up, please don't shoot me. You're seeing that in front of the Justice Building. I'm gonna pan over. That's the fence over there in the corner. Again, no one is paying attention to that fence. And the reason that that's happening is because there's an organized event that's being led by somebody in front of that Justice Building. Everyone's attention is focused on that, and that's where the positive messages can really come out. And so that's the good. That's what I really took from that is, okay, up until around 10 o'clock, it would be what we would normally see as a peaceful protest. So everyone's asking about the moms. The moms are located in a bunch of different points. And so one thing that we're seeing at these protests is the danger of vehicles coming into the area and hitting protesters. And so the moms start going and blocking off certain access points where that might be a danger. So that's the first role of the Wall of Moms, is to protect the perimeter of the overall protest. And so this is a video of that line right here on Southwest Madison Street blocking access to where the protest is going to go and take place. And I'll show you a video of that. Where that previous video was, that's the Justice Center where the spotlight is. A lot of moms. And this is another view for taking a step back. This is something that they started doing in order to go and prevent vehicles from coming through, is they'll physically block it with other vehicles. So you see the motorcycle, there's a group of motorcycle people that come and block off these intersections. They actually brought a truck to go and block that intersection. And that's, again, one of the dangers that we're talking about nowadays when it comes to peaceful protests, is people in vehicles coming in and trying to hit protesters. So that's the famous wall of moms that we talk about. Now at this point, there's no organization when it comes to the event itself. It's kind of people are on their own to go and kind of wander about and find a place to be. So let me go and start showing you kind of how this starts de-escalating pretty quickly. Okay, so the wall of moms moves, or there might be a second group of wall of moms, and they move right here in this area in the fence. The corners, and so what you find out too is that there's not a lot of space on these roads, but when you get to an intersection, you just naturally have more space to gather. So groups are starting to gather at these two intersections right here. So this is the wall of moms directly in front of the fence on that southwest, or the southwest street. And I'll replay this in a second too. So what you're hearing now too is that it's no longer someone leading the crowd, it's the crowd leading itself. So you can hear that chant in the background. This is where you can tell things are going to go and start escalating at this point. The tone has changed completely. There's a lot more anger in the air. People are basically kind of getting ready for battle. But I'll go and just replay this a second. You can kind of hear that overall chant going on in the background. Okay, and the other thing that we know about really big crowds is that it's very easy to get lost into a big crowd. It's very easy to go and kind of like duck out and hide yourself. And so what starts happening at this point, and you'll see this in the next video, is that protesters start throwing fireworks towards the fence. It's a back and forth, and then immediately comes the gas. And so I'll go and start showing this. You're seeing laser pointers over near where that big red flag is. You're seeing people flashing, strobe lights at the federal officers. There may be a firework that goes off near the corner. It's basically starting to devolve into chaos at this point. And you don't know what everyone's intentions is in the crowd. And so it's clear that there's instigators in the crowd. What usually happens too is this first wave of gas is going to go and kind of knock out the less committed people that are in the crowd also. And so you know that at this point, the people are really kind of remaining around are looking to push back, and as far as like going and like really kind of engaging as far as the crowd is concerned. I'll keep going this going. So that's heavy gas. So there's two different kinds of gases that you're seeing. You're seeing kind of like normal, like pepper spray, like that we would be used to. And then there's another gas called CS gas that we would use in the military. That's CS gas. And you can tell the difference. Like pepper is, we're very familiar with like, pepper and kind of like that like flavor to it. CS feels like battery acid. It's like breathing like a battery acid in the air. So you can tell which different kinds, and it will usually kind of come out as kind of like this really thick smoke. This is a couple hours later where you're seeing the gas on the side, and I'm going to go and show another one here. It's where those mothers were standing. You're going to see like someone holding up a peace sign. That's one of the wall of moms. This is where you also have to be careful. They're able to go and shoot these really far. So I thought I was in a safe spot, and you're going to see that one came in extremely close. It ricochets off the ground. There's a lot of different things that are going on as far as like this dynamic goes. So you'll see that peace sign kind of near the umbrella. And like the things that like, and these are things that are meant to go and get us worked up. So you're hearing the drums in the background, and you're seeing this constant cycle of escalation go further and further and further down. At this point on Thursday, I just flew in. This was me just kind of getting my bearings. I was with another veteran, and I didn't want to go any further or get any closer, just out of fear of jeopardizing her safety too. I didn't want her following me to get closer to this event. So this is the time where I packed it up and decided, okay, it's time to leave. What happened shortly after that is that they keep on thinning out the crowd every time they put out gas and every time they put out these flashbangs, to a point where it's a manageable crowd that they can leave that fence area and start clearing out streets. And so what's happening, if you kind of look at that map, people are constantly flowing backwards towards aid. So this is kind of like a good point to kind of talk about what support systems are there in place. And so they have makeshift aid vans ready to go and pull protesters out if they're injured at all. This van was to go and report police violence. That woman that you see there right behind it is actually with the ACLU. That's vitally important too. The legal observers. Having people able to go and witness what's going on and kind of see the events of what's taking place that night. I'll kind of pause for a second because things shift very drastically when it comes to Friday. And I wanted to kind of show, it follows the same pattern, but it was definitely escalated a lot quicker by the federal forces on Friday. So I'll just pause real quick. Does anybody have any questions, or does anybody want to kind of like unpack anything that I just went through right there in that first kind of day of events?
Are these instigators that are coming out in the darkness of night? Are these?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I need.
And so what's happening is, so that rally that you saw first, where everyone's holding up the cell phones, they were doing the general speaking. Those are going to be like your general public. They came there for that event, and then they've been noticing that this thing's been de-escalating like very, very quickly. And so by 11 o'clock around, you have a shift change. I think that's the best way of explaining it, is then you start having small groups of people with different intentions, different motivations filtering in, and then the normal day-to-day protesters that we would normally see at like any of our events start filtering out at 11 o'clock. And you start, and with that, yeah.
So are the moms staying like once it starts to escalate too? Or are they getting out of there, trying to get out of there? Just curious.
And so they're there to a point, I think, and what you'll see with Friday is probably like a better example of how that really plays out. I think you have different tiers of mom volunteers. You have some of those, so like those women that were lined up as far as blocking off the road. I think that those people were the ones that agreed, hey, you know what, we'll go and do this from a safe distance in order to go and protect this area. And then you have some of your really dedicated hardcore people that are going up into that fence line. Friday, I get a lot closer and I have some kind of videos where I can show kind of like upfront confrontations. I think pretty early on, once it starts getting really nasty at that fence, they're retreating back for their own safety. And that was my biggest concern too, because I was going to meet up with a bunch of veterans organizations, and I wanted to make sure that we had a really good safety plan in place. And I didn't think I was going to be able to do that within like a 24 to 48 hour notice. And so I didn't want to put anybody else's like safety at risk. It's very much a mob mentality, and it's very hard not to get caught up in the moment. It's definitely being escalated, and you'll hear it more coming up with the next day. And what happens in these situations is that you look at the person next to me or next to you and you say, okay, am I going to be the first person to back down? Or am I going to be the first person to take a step backwards? And it's almost like a bravery test where, hey, if this person's not going to do it, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to hold strong. And I didn't want that happening with a group of veterans and then having somebody get like critically injured, especially when it comes to what you see the next day. So that was tame. And as far as the first day of events goes, it was supposed to be originally, that was the day that they announced that the federal agents couldn't go and fire on the press or neutral observers like the ACLU. And you can tell that they're indiscriminately firing into the crowd. They don't know who they're aiming at. They don't know who's who as far as this goes.
I want to invite you to go on, Ted, and talk about Friday.
Yeah.
There will be a little time for questions after that. And during that time, I really want to privilege the voices of veterans and people of color.
Perfect. Yeah. So I showed up at like 9:30 on Friday, and what you saw was like a traditional march moving into the area. And I'll go and show that really quick. Something, again, that we're very familiar with in Raleigh. Something that we would normally see. If I didn't tell you, I could have told you that this is Raleigh, you might have believed it. That was leading into the area. So that was actually on this road right here going in. And where you knew that it was, again, it escalated from the night before. The moms came marching in, and I don't know how else to describe it, but like before a boxing match, it was like, you know, like the boxer like coming down the aisle and entering the ring. You see this, like the seas parted for these women.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
These are the positive images that I think do the most good. Showing unity, showing peaceful marching into an area. Also this. And so again, they do a great job with this. It does great on social media. I think it really kind of resonates a lot too. This is, I know we see them chanting with the lights, but this is a moment of silence with the lights. And that is kind of flipping the script. We're seeing so much noise. We're seeing so much action, so much movement in these videos. And this is people standing still, perfectly quiet. It resonates, and it's something that really, really impacts a lot of people that we need to go and pull on our side. So this is where I am definitely not going to both sides this, because you just saw, this is at 10:50 what you just saw. Within 10 minutes, just because they're rattling the fence and just pushing on it, they started going and putting the gas out. So you see them rattling the fence. And that's the gas that's slowly seeping into the crowd. Now, someone asked as far as like the moms and like where they're deployed. This is that same exact spot 2 minutes later. And so this is a good example. I don't know who this person is. He might have perfectly great intentions. I don't know what's in his backpack. I don't know where he's coming from, what he's doing. And I don't want to definitely accuse anybody of anything like wrongdoing or anything like that. But that's the problem, is that that person in that black mask, in that black backpack, I don't know who they are. And that may be someone who is launching fireworks into the crowd versus this wall of moms who is doing a non-aggressive, passive resistance in regards to that fence. And that's the challenge that you face with all these events. Everyone knows what's going to happen next. It's going to go and de-escalate, and it's going to go and both sides are going to go back and forth as far as like attacking that fence. And this is, so you see them right there on that fence. This is within less than 15 minutes. Those bangs, those are flash bangs that they're throwing out into the crowd. The federal agents are. You're seeing water bottles going thrown over. And then you're hearing the pops. And so those are the quote unquote non-lethal projectiles. All this is happening in this area right over here. And it's going up and down the street. It's a lot to kind of digest. And so I'm just going to keep on showing you some more actions that are taking place. You're going to hear a lot of popping. That's them shooting pepper balls towards the protest. This is where the danger starts taking place, and this is where you're seeing the injuries take place. And actually, I'll show you what it looks like when one of these pepper balls looks like. That's the little projectiles that are coming at you. They're also doing kind of like bigger rounds, and they're doing them at extremely close ranges. It keeps on going back and forth. This keeps on escalating and escalating and escalating. When you see this gas, and I'm going to go and show this in the next video, you see like the clouds of it. In reality, what's happening is like 50, 100 feet outside of this, that gas is in the air. The clouds are just it being extremely dense. And again, they're trying to just push people away from that fence. So I had a gas mask. I like a full-blown military-grade gas mask. The little N95 masks are not going to help as far as this is concerned. Even some of those like heavy respirator masks are not going to help because it's going to get into your eyes and it's going to go and really kind of do some pretty decent damage to you. Even just a little bit seeped into my mask, and I had to go and retreat back to like a side road to go and get cleared out and get kind of taken care of. So that's where the first aid and kind of having people kind of away from the action that people can kind of retreat to helps out the most. Again, at this point, it's just a back and forth. It's the later it's getting, as the crowd keeps on getting thinned out, you're having the more extreme people there at this point. I got a view where I was able to go and actually kind of see what was happening behind the fence. They were shooting fireworks, so I will definitely not cover up that fact. Again, you don't know who's doing this. You don't know who's engaged, and anybody can walk up at this point. Anybody can come off the streets and go and start joining this and being a part of this. There were issues. So one thing that like really bothered me the most was I was positioned over here in this area with a bunch of reporters, and somebody got hit with a projectile right up against the fence. And so they brought the person back to right about here, and they were calling for medics. They were calling for the aides come down the road, and they did open fire on these people that were treating this person with pepper balls or whatever projectile that they were putting out there. You can see this person on the ground. They're all trying to help out. Sorry for the language. It was definitely a hot moment. And so, and you picked this up immediately. You always need to have your eyes everywhere, especially from the direction that a lot of this action is coming. It's a wild situation that's out there. And then finally, like the fires thing, they like to go and talk about the fires. There was one moment where like I did walk through one of the fires, and it was actually at the intersection. It was not them trying to burn down the building. And so what you see here is actually a really brave moment. There's full disclosure. What's happening too is that this is taking place at like 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. This video that you're going to see is at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's a lot of kids that are running around that have nothing better to do, that may or may not be drinking at this point also, that are there to join the party and think that like there's no activism going on whatsoever at this point. And so someone started a fire in the middle of this intersection, and one of the regular protesters went and took a fire extinguisher and put it out. They were not happy with Also, you can see in that video, there's a lot of people without masks. That's a huge red flag. You see somebody without a mask on, like usually you would think that like covering up your face is something that they would want to do, but it proves that you are not supposed to be there. Because one thing that out of all this chaos, the one thing that was really focused on was wearing a mask, to the point like where like I was kind of laughing at myself. I'm like, I'm glad that they're concerned about safety and as far as like spreading COVID-19. I'm like looking around at like all the other dangers out there. It was kind of like the least of my worries because I'm so used to wearing a mask. But it proves that you came down there spur of the moment and you're not prepared, and you are kind of on a different level as far as like messaging is concerned. So I'll kind of just go through some kind of like quick takeaways. It's a tale of two rallies or a tale of two protests. When you have an organized protest with an organized time, with organized speakers, things are under control. You're able to go and push the narrative And it's, again, we're talking about mob mentality here. And so one thing that we do very well is we build people up, and then we, I don't want to say bring them down, but we turn down the temperature, where we give them action items to go and do. We sing peaceful protest songs. We acknowledge each other. We go and focus on community as a whole. That's happening there between the hours of, like, let's say like 7 and 11. Those are the great positive moments to go and take away. We also have the moms and we have the veterans putting up these walls. That speaks to our protective instinct, which is something that's positive, it's something that changes the narrative. It doesn't allow the both sides conversation to happen, where it's, we are peaceful protesters that are staging an intervention in regards to this. They are using violence against us. And it's like, you know, like when like you're in the schoolyard and it's like, you know, well, he threw the first punch, or it usually doesn't matter at that point. Everyone's going to the principal's office. And kind of focusing on that. Raleigh was a little bit different with what was going on as far as the chaos in the streets. It was more of a cat and mouse game that was going on around the Green and around Fayetteville Street. This was more centralized, where there was like a central point of focus on that fence. It's good to have a central focus on a specific area to avoid that cat and mouse. But the problem is you can't get rid of a building, no matter what. So it's always going to be that center of attention. There's always going to be violence taking place around that building, versus trying to think of the word, like a movement needs something to go and kind of like move us forward. I think maybe that's why we call it a movement, is that we need to go from point A to point B. When the focus is on an inanimate object, there's no movement at that point. Everything is getting stopped at that fence. There's no discussions going on. There's no resolution where you can step back and you can say, okay, if X happens, we won't protest anymore. And I think at the end of the day, they're talking about, okay, like the federal agents have to leave. And so what's going to have to happen sooner or later is that fence is going to have to come down. The federal agents are going to have to leave. And to be honest, what's going to happen is something's going to happen to that building one day where it's just going to be heavily vandalized. And hopefully that breaks the cycle. But we don't want to get to that place here in Raleigh, because you can't back down. It's really, really, really difficult to get off that highway once you're on it. And especially the positioning, I think about the federal building within Raleigh itself. Like, you don't want violence going and taking place and moving down New Bern Avenue. And you start really losing the message in regards to what this was at the end of the day. This is about Black Lives Matter. This is about racial injustice, which has then transformed into taking away people's rights in regards to protesting freely. Safety, I'm always like, I was a medic in the Army, so like safety is always the first thing that I think about too. I think what we haven't really ran into problems in regards to violence with our events, at least, but again, things have escalated differently here in Raleigh. Maybe being careful about backup plans and trying to figure out, taking a look at the map and actually saying to ourselves, if something does go wrong, where do we get people to in regards to safety? So again, I'm like thinking of the federal building here. Does it mean bringing people back to Moore Square? What do we do to go and make sure that we're being the best stewards to the people that are arriving at these protests? marshals. And so I think this is where kind of like the moms, people are looking, I think, to the moms and to the veterans and to the doctors for some kind of control over this. And if you nip it early to say something or see something, say something, hey, is someone hijacking our message by going and throwing something? And that's what I kind of view it as, is someone taking away from what we're really organized to do. And what do we do to stop it? Because again, it spreads like wildfire. Once the first thing gets thrown and nobody stops it, the second thing gets thrown, and then something else happens, and then somebody goes a little bit further and further and further. And figuring out how we go about doing that and have communication within the crowd itself in order to go and prevent something happening from one end, whereas it might be happening on another. Like, because with this situation, it was only like maybe like a half a mile stretch. But if something's going on over one side, you may not be aware of it on the other side. I'm trying to think again. There's a lot to unpack, and I know that we have a lot of time or we can go and kind of like discuss a little bit of this on Thursday too. But I'll pause, and I'll go and kind of take another round of questions, and I'll try to answer them as honestly as possible. And I know that there's probably tons of stuff going off in the chat.
We have a lot of stuff going on in the chat, and if you put your email in the chat, we'll send you the chat. Right now, we only have about 8 minutes before we formally close, and during that time, I really do want people of color and veterans to speak up, because after that, we'll all hang around to talk further. And thank you. That was amazing. So I'm going to try to get you back on the screen. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Doug.
So, Ted, thank you so much, brother. I'm a Vietnam vet, and I've been active with Veterans for Peace since 1988, been at a lot of events, and you've portrayed that in a very balanced way. I think the hive mentality, when that happens, is very difficult to anticipate where it might go. I'll just share briefly. I've been in communication with 9 people in the local area who are members of Veterans for Peace, and I've been speaking with the national organization, which is really an international organization. And we have on the agenda for August 5th, you have to be a member for Veterans for Peace, but to look at this issue with other veterans, and that's particularly with Black Lives Matter veterans and others. And I will get back to Karen or others and let you know where that develops. But already I have, connections going out nationally to my organization. And I will share that as I receive more. But I really want to honor you for standing in the fray. And I know it's a particular vulnerable spot for veterans, especially when you have to worry about post-traumatic stress issues being re-stimulated, the uncertainty, the adrenaline rush, the hypervigilance, all of these things that go on that, take us away from what I would say is reaching back into the field. This way you become very beta focused, and you become very, very much driven by the old brain, the amygdala, and you're not living from the frontal brain, and you're not in a meditative state. But I just really want to honor the balance, and the video, terrific, absolutely terrific. And if I can connect with you offline, I'm happy to do that, my friend.
Yeah, and so, Doug, I'm glad you said that, because you reminded me of something. So the National Wall of Vets organization, I was in contact with them the whole entire time I was there. And at a minimum, I'm going to be heading up the North Carolina chapter. I may be working with them nationally. And so, Doug, yeah, I want to go and work with you, because I think you hit it right in the head that we need to reframe the message, and we need to make sure, and I've seen this too in the chat, we need to go and teach people about like non-violent techniques and kind of utilize that. So, Doug, yeah, if I put my email in the chat, if you want to go and send me an email, I would love to go and talk to you and kind of figure out how we can go and.
I would love to do that, my friend. Thank you.
And actually, I don't know if she feels up to it. Blakely, I don't know if you just want to introduce yourself really quickly. So Blakely's heading up the Wall of Moms here in North Carolina, and I was talking to her this morning too about what we're discussing.
Yeah, hi. It's so nice to be here. Yeah, it all happened really fast. So we're trying to figure out, I need an admin if anybody knows someone who can help with social media, and particularly like a Facebook private group setup kind of thing. We're going to start recruiting volunteers, I guess. But I've been talking to Ted and just kind of identifying different people. I'm not actually in Raleigh. And I think, other than the convention, which I guess is back in Charlotte, I think most of the activity will be happening around Raleigh if we have, need for folks. So I'd just like to stay in dialogue with anybody who can kind of help me. It's a little overwhelming, but excited to get a group together and sort of in touch with the moms in Portland. We have a whole chat going. It's surreal, like shopping for gas masks and military gear and stuff like that. It's kind of crazy, but I got kind of emotional when I saw the pictures of the moms. It's like, it's moving to me.
Thanks. Lovely to meet you. And thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Just a few deep breaths to kind of take in what Ted has been talking to us about. And once again, I would really like to invite the voices of people of color and veterans. These protests are protests connected to the movement for Black lives. It's complicated that in Portland, about 97% of the population is white. And so we just have to keep centering the voices of people of color. And I'm also really interested in hearing from other veterans who may be on this call today.
Ted, thank you very much for your report. And I just want to know if, apart from what's going on the street, are you aware of anything constructive that's going on in terms of policing policy in Portland? Was there any discussion about that?
Thank you, Cliff.
Not in the way that we would imagine. What was happening, I think after I left on Saturday, Portland police started working with the federal agencies in regards to controlling the crowds. The message is getting lost. And so that's not helping the cause. And I think, again, that's why I think it's so important to go and refocus it on the Black Lives Matter piece, is because it seems like it's losing its influence on a local level. I know that on a federal level, I know that the Democrats were doing something yesterday in regards to trying to prevent, or no, it was the Democratic mayors were trying to work to go and prevent federal agents from coming into their cities. But that was the whole point of this too, is to kind of put exposure, kind of like, what do they always say, that like light is the best disinfectant, to kind of show people, hey, this is really what's going on. We need to go and talk to everybody to stop this. Because that's the match that's getting lit, is showing up in tactical gear in an American city. We're Americans do not like that. That's what is changing the narrative. And I think that's on purpose too, is that they don't want to talk about Black Lives Matter. They don't want to talk about racial inequity. And so they want to go and make it into a protest discussion, which the right wing loves to go and label us as Marxist, communist, whatever they want to go and call us. So yeah, Clifford, I wish there was something more going on.
Yeah, I'm looking at this kind of big picture, and I see this as perhaps a pretext for something as drastic as martial law arriving on election day.
Yeah.
And the idea of perhaps using federal forces, be they these green men or other green people, to intimidate voters and basically alter the result of the election. And some of you are probably aware that there was the president of the NAACP in Portland who wrote an opinion piece about this very matter on, I think it appeared earlier last week in the Washington Post. Then this past Saturday or Sunday, there was a piece in the New York Times written by a creative writer. It had more to do with, you recall that Athena individual who was posturing nude in the street, and just the idea that this is it's getting co-opted and diffused and taken in all different kinds of directions. And so discipline and focus is really what's required right now.
Yeah.
I think the longer that these continue, the harder it is to go and keep that integrity there. And that's why, like, I'm glad we're having this discussion now, because we need to, if it does happen in Raleigh or if it happens in Charlotte, we need to set the tone early to make sure it doesn't go and de-escalate into this, and that we are giving the voices to the people that matter, and that we're putting them in the forefront to go and redirect the message. Because I'm seeing in the chat, it's the other side is using this as ammunition against us.
We have time for one more question. I'm going to call on David, and then we'll do a formal closing, but everybody's welcome to hang out afterwards for more discussion.
I don't really have a question, but I do have praise. Thanks for being all involved, all y'all. And I'm been following for a long time, but recently became active with Veterans for Peace. So welcome to join just in time, it looks like. So I'll be with you all.
Thank you so much. At the beginning, I really wanted to invoke, and I forgot, our ancestor who died, and was such a humble and powerful voice of peace. I want to really respect the moral authority of veterans and people of color who've lived through stuff and can talk to us in ways that can guide our steps forward. I really, most of all, want to thank Ted. This was amazing and beautiful and helpful. And he's going to hang around. Also, I just want to say, too, we'll be here Thursday at 11:30 to continue to have this discussion and other discussions, because there's just too much to talk about for 1 hour. And if you get the tiny letter, you have both links. If you don't get the tiny letter, you can ask for it in the chat. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mike Flaherty for our closing song. And we can all mute ourselves so we can sing along.
Oh, I moved into the house thinking that would improve the quality of the signal, but it still says my internet connection is unstable. My network bandwidth is low, but here's a rendition of Dylan for closing. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam. Stand up, but we're not alone. Silence no longer can just be condoned. Country we love is worth saving. We lift up our voices and pick up our phones. November will bring rearranging. Come, Senator Tillis, won't you heed our call? Still after 6 years, not listening at all. Black voter suppression may be your downfall. As folks realize and start raging, our chants shake your windows and rattle your walls. Your Senate seat soon will be changing. You may stand in your doorway or block up your halls. For the ones being hurt, we will stand till we fall. The dreamers, the elders, hungry and poor. Battle outside is raging, from occupied Portland to war-torn D.C. We see hearts and minds are changing. The line is drawn, the curse is cast. Crimes and corruptions will come out at last. Past now, present will be past. The artery is rapidly fading. First ones now, later be last. For the times they are changing.
Outstanding.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Karen said it was week 183. I think it's week 186, but who's counting? There were 82 of us here today. And as Susan always says, shine on, and I keep my candle lit. You know, this week we've been saying goodbye to John Lewis. John Meacham has a book coming out in a few weeks about John Lewis. His Truth is Marching On. And in Meacham's last interview with Dear John, John said, I'm restless. Well, John, you can rest now, but we must remain restless. John Meacham also asked him, what's your favorite movie? And without hesitating, he said, Gandhi. Gandhi said, a small body of determined spirits, fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission, can alter the course of history. John Lewis and his spirit of nonviolence and forgiveness, and we must remember that forgiveness has altered the course of history. We and others like us that must remember that we, in our own way, we're doing the same thing. And as Cliff said, disciplined and focused and people of peace. So shine on, shine on. And now unmute yourself so we can chant. Forward together.
One step back.
Forward together.
One step back.
Forward together.
One step back.
Woo!
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Love
and
you.
welcome again. People are here for the first time.
Thank you.
Listening
Yes, my friend Dee from Creekside. So glad you're here.
listening on the
today
video,
with
we are going to continue and get
Dee.
the question and answers with Ted. So stay tuned. We'll keep on going.
And put, if you haven't shared your email with me before, put it in the chat now, and I'll be sending out the chat.
Ted, do you want to hang around for a little while?
Yeah, if anybody wants to just chat or ask any questions, I am wide open. So I'm more than happy to go and just talk anybody through what they saw.
I'm going to invite everybody except him, including me, to. I'm remuting myself until I have something to say.
This is Jeanette. May I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So that was brilliant. And thank you so much for making a narrative out of what looks like chaos coming to us through the news. I so appreciate that. The message that I heard in part a subtext is this has got to stop. And since the feds are not going to stop it, at least we can't figure out a way to pressure them from what did you come away with the people in the street should do what?
So that's where I'm like really having a tough time kind of figuring it out. And it's the only way that I can imagine this is that the good people finally have enough of the very few instigators that are out there, and they start policing themselves earlier and earlier each night. Portland's a whole different kind of environment also. There's a lot of anarchists that kind of live in the area anyways, and so it doesn't really matter what side they're on. They're just there to just cause complete chaos. And so I'm hoping that community kind of really pushes back on themselves. And I think that's kind of like the message that I keep on coming away from here, is that if we do enough self-policing early and kind of really set the tone where what's acceptable behavior and what's unacceptable behavior, would kind of prevent that from happening. They're at a point where they're like, that cycle is really tough to break at this point. So I wish I had a better answer for you.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's Maple. Like in Charlottesville, I mean, the Antifas were there because, or whoever, some of them were, because the cops weren't doing their freaking job. So maybe Portland's, I've been trying to listen up in Michael Moore's podcast and all that about the Portland thing, and the cops have been horrible there. So, for a local area, that they've had their niche there as, fighting the bad things. So you can't really discount them, right? I'm just saying. And also the naked woman, maybe that's like a Portland, West Coast thing. You can't just dismiss what the people do there, I mean, I don't know enough. I'm just bringing it up.
No, you're right. So
more. Yeah.
No, you make a great point. So there was no police presence whatsoever at all. So I at least the 2 nights that I was there. And so there may have been undercover police within the crowd. There may have been somebody that I didn't see, but there was no interaction with anybody outside of that fence on like the crowd side. And you're right. And so there are things that are uniquely Portland. And so that's why I made sure that, again, I was like an observer and not like an active participant too, because I have no right to kind of tell them like how to go about doing things. And you'll see that. So the Riot Ribs is like a perfect example of like, they're there like showing that they're taking care of their community and they're feeding all the protesters. That's like a positive thing. The Wall of Moms, that's another positive thing. The Athena that you see the pictures of, another good example of like nonviolent protest. It's these very few bad apples that you're seeing that come there with the fireworks or come there with like bottles of frozen water, that their only intention is to go and cause damage. That's where you're losing the message. And that's where the other side is really going and focusing in on what we're seeing. I think back to Charlottesville. One of the images that like really kind of rings true to me is the people of the cloth all lining up like hand in hand, marching together. And I think that that set the tone for one side, our side, in regards to that, hey, we're here as a peaceful protest. And then what, again, it happens is people are going to defend themselves too. And so that's where you're seeing, if someone goes and punches you, you're probably going to punch them back. And then that's where kind of like those skirmishes are breaking out within the groups. So again, it's maybe like a little bit of self-policing that really just needs to be done. And again, we're different than Raleigh's different too. So we can kind of tell where things are going and kind of like who might be going and causing problems beforehand, and kind of like go and learn a lot of really good de-escalation techniques. I think that's the biggest thing that we really need to go and practice right now, is how to go and de-escalate someone who is an agitator within a group. Yeah, I saw that happen early. There was a really good example of that happening early during like that peaceful event. Someone tried to go and disrupt it, and they were basically swarmed by de-escalation.
No, during the Moral Monday movements here, we did have intensive trainings. Perhaps we could have used even more, but there were people who were chanting different messages from the ones that we were there to bring, and we very quickly went to them and reminded them of our message and what we were to focus on and to be focusing on the issues. And we were able, in some instances, to quiet them, and in others to ask them to please leave or take their message someplace else. Ted, in your experience, would it be helpful to say, for example, that our protest, and when I say our, that's inclusive of any of the participating sponsoring organizations, that our part of the protest will end at 10 or 10:30 or 11, and we all agree that we will leave at that time, and then those who stay will clearly be distinguished and differentiated from the actual protest? Would something like that work?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's not going to be like a cure-all, but making that very well known and making sure that the media is absolutely aware of that, and making sure that you can almost visibly see, the movement out of the area. Yeah, I absolutely believe in that. And that's what happened in Raleigh originally. And I think some of those events that we were at in Raleigh, like where you can tell, like, okay, this was a planned event that was going to scheduled, and this is when we're going to have a hard end time. It differentiates what's going on. So yeah, definitely. That is one of the key things and that's how I was able to go and talk to you guys specifically in regards to, hey, this is when I saw a shift, because it was clear that event was over. Making sure that we're really aware of our speakers too, and making sure that we're really good about this. Like there's I would say 12 or 15 people that we usually see at these movements and these actions that are really good speakers, and then positioning them at the right time so we can bring down the crowd. It's like we're bringing them up to this really high pitch, but we don't want to leave them there and then have them have nothing to do and just wander the streets. Let's go and kind of bring them back down and try to calm them to go and say, hey, meet us if it's going to be a continual thing, meet us next night. Also, something that just came to mind too, there was no looting, there was no damage to property outside of that immediate area. That was a problem that we had here in Raleigh. Just thinking ahead of potential things that might happen with the federal building, it's not a bad thing that that's away from things. My only fear is that it's kind of close to a residential neighborhood. So something to keep in mind too. That at least took away one narrative from Portland. No one can say that there was looting or anything like that, because that was not the case. And no one can show visual evidence of that at all, because again, they were confined to a very tight area.
Doug.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I was part of, and Vicki was also part of setting up one of the Occupies in Washington, D.C. way back, and part of Veterans for Peace role there. We had training prior to going there, and we established peacekeepers. That's what we called ourselves, and we had identified, I have an old sweatshirt that says Peacekeeper on it. And we did, a good day or more of role playing where you are in fact, anticipating provocative behavior, or you have somebody that's stepping in, and that might be one thing we could consider. The trouble is, again, depending on the crowd and who's there, not everyone is going to be compliant with the peacekeeper. I mean, even one of our organizers, I remember we had, I won't mention who she was, but she's a woman who's been around for a long, long time. We had an outside person who was standing on the perimeter who was making a lot of provocative comments that she found very unacceptable. And, it led to her going over face to face with this person and, creating an altercation. And I remember going over there trying to diffuse, and I did diffuse it. But, here you have your own person getting hooked into this narrative that the other person is spewing, and wanting them out of, quote, our space. So I think again, what Ted is talking about is, having some either I would call it risk management, identifying areas that might be troublesome and stopping that earlier. And if you have people who are identified either with an armband, as peacekeepers or as medics or, different roles, these people can come in. And we did this at the Winter Soldier for Afghan and Iraq vets. We had people who were identified to stop agitators. And we had a few that came in to the convention there to, stir up things. 2 people would sweep down and whisk that person out quickly. But it takes planning. It takes a tremendous amount of quietness within oneself, and not to get hooked. And that is an ongoing piece that's necessary, not to get the trigger going. But we could consider some sort of pre-training, perhaps, and if we had an identified group that we communicate to the media and to our public people, whether it's veterans or whether it's the Wall of Moms, and these become the people who are the, quote, peacekeepers, then these are the people that are kind of given that instruction, and we go through some training, or we do Zoom training, whatever we need to do to at least have some preparatory consideration for what might develop. My 2 cents.
No, you hit it so on the nose. And like, we'll always look at like veterans as kind of like an authority figure, and kind of like we've at least had some sort of training when it comes to like managing things like this. And I think you're right. Clearly identifying certain people, letting the crowd know beforehand, hey, if you see somebody with, like a blue armband or a blue vest or certain kind of identifying marker, that person's there to help you and to make sure that like we're being safe in this situation. If you see something, say something to them. Or even if it's like a big cloud, like I know that they had like little flags that they would pop up in the air. And if you're scanning just the top of the group, you can see, okay, well, there's a little flag. I know that there's someone there. And then working with the authority. And so here's the thing too that I think we like was missing in Raleigh is working with the authorities, and don't let them go and start indiscriminately going and causing problems within that crowd themselves. So let's say that there is someone that is throwing something. There's like a real big agitator that we can't handle at this point. Going over to the police officer, hey, we have one person that is clearly causing a problem. Can you go and deal with this one specific person? Versus, hey, that group over there, where it may be just one person, is doing something bad. Let's go in with batons and start beating everybody in that specific group. And I know that takes a lot of patience, and that takes a lot of kind of detaching yourself from the scene, because it very much becomes like a us versus them kind of feeling. But I think we've had success with that in the past, like with Capitol Police, and at least with our events. Yeah. And I know that like I've always thanked them, even if I'm walking by them. And it wasn't for me, it wasn't for him, it was for everybody else that was marching around me to hear me say thank you to him. Like I think is what he's the colonel, like the tall guy that we always like run into. And it, again, sets the tone. But I think and that's what I'm going to be working with the Wall of Vets. I have a call with them today to go and figure out what kind of training we can put in place. And that's why I'm working with the Wall of Moms too, because that was the first thing that I'm always talking about is how do we go and do this safely? And versus like there's different roles that we can do. We can do walls, but I think we really need to have kind of like those marshals or those observers, and then figure out a way to go and communicate with each other too. I don't know if it's just like simple little radios. We
had walkie-talkies that the that the peacekeepers had, and we were able to communicate. When I've been with setting up the bell tower in Raleigh with Roger Ehrlich, when the police have been there, we have always made it a point to go to them and say, you know, here's the contact person. If you see something that's developing, please come to me or, you know, these 3 people, and we will work with you to diffuse any potential agitation. So I think it's that preemptive kind of planning that needs to happen, and discussion with the police. I mean, some of those folks, not every, you know, police person, woman is, out to hurt us. You know, I think there's certainly some, you know, misdirected individuals, just as though there are in every area of life. But I think we need to focus on, I'd also like to, and I haven't done this personally, but I will take it upon myself to go back and to look at some of Martin Luther King's initiatives in terms of peacekeeping. You know, what do you need to do to have in place that I think we could pull out from the literature there and just have a 1-page kind of thing, whatever that might be, that would say, you know, maybe it's carrying your sacred stone with you in your pocket and reminding you that stone is connected to the earth and you need to stay grounded. I don't know what it is, but, you know, some sort of mnemonics for people to come back into their breath, you know, to take a breath, to walk away from the crowd if you're feeling too hot, you know, to talk to somebody else, to make agreements that we will talk to somebody if there's an emotional trigger that's been touched. Yeah. So when we talk about having, when I do men's work and I do group work, you know, there's a piece where we want to be very careful if somebody's the leader of the group, that we don't have what I call king killers or queen killers, people that want to violate, you know, leadership. And, you know, so you have these people that are looking for the shadow, you know, that will develop and will stop that, you know, and bring that to the attention of those that are in the
Miss
group.
Maple, yeah, you might have neutral, you know, the National Lawyers Guild has a great training for the legal observers. You could just have even homemade vests with observer. People would probably be happy to volunteer. And NLG is a group that would have those trainings, and there's a strong presence of NLG lawyers around. So I bet you could call up quickly some good observers, and then they're more neutral people than, you know, authoritative, you know, cops or military types. Over.
Hey, we're kind of into a micro level here on planning non-existent protests, so I want to just open it out a little bit. So the time that I've faced riot cops in North Carolina was in Alamance County. And what I know about if anything is ever going to work is that it's going to be a coalition of a lot of groups. And Elena was in on that. It was the Poor People's Campaign and some people who are more on that anarchist scale, I think. And Elena, I wondered if you could just talk to us about this kind of increased complexity about coalition building, which is what will have to happen, and people of color being in leadership if we're going to stay on message.
And thank you, Karen. And I think that's the one thing that we have to really, first thing is always know who is running this protest. If you decide to take to the streets,
yes,
make sure you know who is running it, what the messaging is, what the outcome, expected outcome, and you have to really trust your gut, number one. Number two, calling in the cops. You can work with the cops. I'm with you. This is where we're going. You have one point person, but calling in the cops when there's people of color in a Black Lives Matter situation is a disaster.
Yeah.
Recently, right here in Raleigh, and I'm not going to talk about the looting, I'm talking about within NC Bourne, there were motorcycle cops with their cameras on, arrested three people, all three, the charges were dropped because Chief Deck Brown reviewed the video and said, I am going to recommend to the DA that those charges be dropped. And guess what? They were women of color. So never, ever, 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 ever call the cops in. If you have a point person who is working with the police, this is my opinion. If you have a point person working with the police because of traffic and first of all, Raleigh is not a town of militias. White supremacy is happening in Portland. When we have been in organizations, as Karen was speaking to, in Alamance, that was Poor People's Campaign, to Carolina Jews for Justice, and it may have even been a third group.
An Alamance group.
An Alamance, Siembra. There was a training the day before. There was a training day of. People volunteered and knew their roles. So if you were going to exercise your constitutional right to protest and perhaps push the envelope, you knew going in what was going to transpire. If you decided you wanted to be a marshal, you went to marshal training. If you were doing traffic, you went to traffic training. So Alamance happens to be, like Portland, phenomenally racist. And really, really just anti-people, in my opinion. So hence, the training had to be pretty intense. Tony and I were the coordinators for the state for the 40 days of action. We would run 2.5-hour trainings on nonviolent civil disobedience.
So Elena, I don't so much want to talk about that part, but the part that I want you to underline for me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, please,
is that what I remember is that this was a coalition.
Yeah.
And because it was a coalition, a huge number of people were there. Bessie was there, Scarlett was there, I was there, a lot of other people here were there.
Yeah.
And it was hard to bring this coalition together. Poor People's Campaign, people didn't necessarily agree with all the things that Siembra wanted to do, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're absolutely right.
So I want to really underline that, because we don't want to be some little group, Tuesdays with Tillis, trying to pull off a big protest. We're going to have to do this with other groups that may not see things exactly as we do. And that will be our biggest challenge. So I just want to hold that macro thing while we're talking about the details.
Yeah, I have something, because the Poor People's Campaign does stress ecological devastation as well. At that Alamance, you had people coming up from Asheville and Extinction Rebellion, and you had Sunrise Movement people. They were helping people park and all that. So there are those people too, and a lot of young people in those groups. And I just didn't know if you were going to have like something regular in Raleigh, but I just want to make a point that you've got noontime right now, but if you want people of color, a lot of them work during the day and they can't show up till like 5 o'clock after work. And then it gets dark by November. It's dark. So I just wanted to bring up that point. It's the time of day is important for people that work, and a lot of people of color have to work. Over.
Thank you so much.
Can I say something too?
Who is this?
This is Brenda. I live in Alamance. I like what Elena said, but I know that we have to keep it. And I do know about the Poor People's Campaign. Well, one person has said it in terms of not working with Siembra. But I think it's key that we keep this thing as broad as possible.
As what?
Broad as possible.
Yes.
In terms of the groups.
Yes.
Also, at the same time, we do have to be real in terms of discipline and having the training that we need if we're planning to do something. Because like now, I was part of that too, but I was not part. I had no intention of standing around for the direct action, because I just said that. But that should be the okay for everybody because of the situation and the gathering. And to me, it's to be really clear, help educate people clearly on the political situation right now, because people don't see the clarity. I want to say, Doug, the police is not seen as a help for people in certain areas.
Right.
It's no way. And because we know certain characteristics about certain areas, especially when you say Alamance is just like Portland in certain characteristics, we have to acknowledge that. And we have to understand the different relationships that's going to happen. but keep it as broad as possible, because I didn't see the problem with Siembra. The other, I don't know what other groups was involved. Now I came as Down Home, who is an intentional multiracial organizing group. So let's just keep those issues, those political points up and educating. Just continue. We have to do that. We don't have no choice to educate people. And I want to just say, I don't want to say much, but I just want to mention the looting. This word keeps coming up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and this word keeps coming up. But it's that we still have to bring in the historical narrative of what's been happening to human beings that don't have the same skin tone to own any of those businesses. Now, I'm not saying that two wrongs make it right, but we do need to continue to educate people, because this capitalist system has a way of permeating our senses in so many different ways. So we can only struggle to do better with that. That's all.
I really, really thank you for that, Brenda. And I want to kind of focus us at the end. That was so eloquent and so where we need to be, because we'll be coming back to a lot of these other discussions. A big part of what we can do as Tuesdays with Tillis, each of us individually, is work to shift the narrative. And when people talk about looting, we have to talk about how white America has taken away the wealth, the land, the rights, the bodies of Black people in this country for 400 years. We have to keep returning to that. That's what looting really is. You know, what's in Mitch McConnell's bill, that's looting. I mean, the federal treasury for the FBI building, everything that's in that bill, the free lunches for the rich people, that's looting. And the federal treasury has been looted for the rich ever since Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. And so that's what we have to keep returning to. Where is the real looting? And you know, we only have 10% as many Black-owned farms now as we had 100 years ago. Why? Because the Klan drove people off their land and didn't recompensate them. You know, and lots of other looting. During the financial crisis in 2008, Black people lost their homes. So when we're talking about taking to the streets, all these things are in the background. And I really love, Brenda, that you're with us and brought up Down Home. And there have been some broad coalitions that I think that we can work with that include great organizations like Down Home. And Cece was with us from the National Domestic Workers. There's Raise Up, there's Poor People's Campaign, Fight for 15, like just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people that we need if we want to be on the streets and that we need in order to have any moral authority. I'm sorry, I'm preaching, but I'm a preacher. So, but meanwhile, we've been doing this thing that's really exciting to me, which is we've been doing this little Twitter war. We started it last Thursday. There's a bunch of us on Twitter, and we're trying to sort of get the truth out and debunk the lies. So that's part of what we're going to talk about on Thursday. I'm sure we'll talk about more. We'll probably have a separate sort of Twitter meeting, but I just want to say there's so much we can do, and coalition building, we can all be a part of that. Get to know people who can help us with a very broad coalition. I'll shut up now. We should end soon probably, but
you know, Karen, I think, but like you hit around that, and this is why I'm glad we had this discussion, is that we have a lot of things to think about and digest, and we never know when the next thing is going to pop up in Raleigh, and it could be all of a sudden within 48 hours we find out that he's sending federal troops for no reason whatsoever. So yeah, I think I always go back to like HK on J. Like, I don't know why, like, the unity that we have as a community for that event it's like everybody is there. It's like, and there is no problems. Like, everyone is just there for the same cause. And I hope that we can go and now let's have like a rapid response team with all those organizations where we just pick up the phone and we can get everybody on a Zoom meeting really quickly from all of those different groups and kind of figure out, who's going to be the lead and what different roles, even within each organization, is going to take. Because I think certain roles fit kind of different organizations better. Like the Veterans for Peace, that's like a perfect fit as far as like marshals are concerned. And there might be other people that take different kinds of things. So I appreciate everyone's feedback too, because I'm learning, like I was just a set of eyes and I'm learning through trial and error how this is going. And I think looking back in the past and what worked and what hasn't worked is really important too, and kind of being open to absolutely everything. So I appreciate everyone educating me. I haven't been through half of the stuff that you guys have been through. So thank you.
Yeah, this is Mark Swallow. So thank you, Ted. I think that excellent presentation. I think, as you said, we're not really sure what's going to happen next and when. And it sounds like we probably should try building some coalitions in prep, right? So, which organizations do we want to reach out to? Let's reach out to them and lay out some game plan for what might be next. So when that happens, we're not scurrying around trying to build that coalition at the last minute.
They kind of already exist.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe they're in your head. I have no idea. So that's fantastic.
Karen, you're muted.
The group that formed around COVID-19, right? That's what you're talking about?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about groups that around the murder of George Floyd.
Oh, okay.
And Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
they have been protesting nearly every night since June 1st. So, and it's all been nonviolent. So that's why it's. And I'll be honest with you, we were part of a group of moms that were the first marshals, and now these kids have developed a network of marshals, medics, illegal observers. They have it all in place. And they also work in conjunction with the high school Black Lives kids out of Enloe. So it's NC Born. I mean, Galia's daughter is part of it. And be very, very clear. We are allies. We check our privilege because, to Karen's point, period. The messaging, and Ted, what you're saying is the messaging has been lost. And I completely agree with you in Portland. And the messaging, now it's just, oh, well, the moms are great. And I'm not saying the moms are not great. Well, what the hell? Black Lives Matter. What are we talking about? Sorry, getting off my soapbox too.
No, but you're right. And that's what they were trying to do, is refocus the message. And they were having events that literally were called refocus the message.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what support. And you're right. Hey, this isn't our narrative. We're just here to give you support. Where do you need, it's almost like, where do you need extra bodies? Where do you need an extra set of hands? You know what? Let us go and take some pressure off of you so you can focus on keeping that message and focusing on what really matters. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be working with the Wall of Vets, and that's kind of like their overall mission statement too, is that we're there to help, show us, point us to where you need the help. And so I'll be in touch with everybody else too, as far as this goes, but if you need to go and start calling on them for anything, let me know. I'll see what kind of resources we can go and provide. Then I'll shut up too. I'll get off my soapbox.
Listen, thank you all so much. And thank you, Ted. Thank you, Ted, so much. And thank you to everyone who added so much to this incredibly rich in-process discussion. And we could go on all day, but let's not. Let's regroup on Thursday, next Tuesday. We're just going to keep going. So I love this closing by Asada Shakur. And it'd be great to do it together. So unmute yourself and we'll try to talk slowly. We have a duty to fight for our freedom.
We have a duty
to fight for our freedom.
We have a duty to win.
We have a duty
to win.
We will love each other and protect each other.
We will love each other and protect each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Yeah.
Nothing to lose but our chains.
Chains.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
This was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ted.
That's Ted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda.
Ted, if you